this little clip, I'm just going to introduce you to task 1 for the bus timetable system for late buses for the pre-release. So the scenario is as follows. You have 6 bus routes here. These are the 6 bus routes A to F, and you have a lot of data on them showing when they're late or when they're early. These are the data points that you've got. There's 20 of them, which is 4 weeks. You've got week 1, week 2, week 3, and week 4 there. And you have buses that are on time, exactly. Buses that are early, so positive numbers represent minutes early. And you've got buses that are late. So we've got late buses are represented by negative numbers. That's pretty much the deal for this assignment. You've got to store all that data for the first task. So you need to, essentially for every single day, you need to go through each of the bus routes and store, obviously, this data. You can choose for your pre-release. I mean, you could store that in 20 by 6, which is 120 variables if you really wanted to, but I hope everyone would appreciate that's a poor idea. So you need to come up with an idea for how to store that, and obviously the array data type is going to be good. Those would need to get stored in an array of some sort. The names, the actual names of the buses would need to go in some kind of array, and then it's kind of up to the programmer as to which way they do this. They could either make 20 arrays of 6 elements, which is a possibility, and for each of these they would end up with 20 of these arrays, each storing these 6 elements of integers. Or they would store 6 arrays of 20 numbers a pop. I think that's probably easier because it's less code to type. So we'll end up with an array for all of those words. We'll end up with an array for all of those words. And for each of these highlighted columns, we're going to make another array. And that's where you're going to be storing that data. So task 1 is as follows. Setting up the data storage using arrays, set up system to enable data for each bus route to be entered, covering each day of a 4-week period. It must be possible to enter the data supplied or your own set of data using suitable prompts as necessary. So ultimately, the program has to allow the person to input all the data over and over and over again. Now, I know a lot of you are going to want to be plonking in 120 data points over and over and over again. That gets very painful. So we'll program it to start with as though we're going to be putting in 20 lots of 6, but eventually we're going to trim it right back down so that we're not going to be doing 120 points of data, but in fact a lot less. So the basic template is assign constants, declare arrays, initialize arrays, loop over the day names and loop over the bus routes. Prompt for the input, please enter time for whatever, for day and bus route. Get the input, make sure that it's validated, and then store it in the array. Now in terms of validation, you've got to come up with your own rule for the validation, but it doesn't actually specify. Again, it's a fairly bit ambiguous, but we were chatting about this the other week in class, and we came up with the idea that the exam board just want you to come up with sensible values. Someone in class last week said that potentially looking at that data and being realistic, we can assume that the maximum that a bus can be early would be 10 minutes. So positive 10 would be the highest number. And in terms of lateness, someone said perhaps let's say minus 60. It doesn't matter really, as long as those two numbers are realistic. And obviously, this whole part here would be a repeat until, because we've talked about that idea that if you're getting input from the user, using a repeat until to get the input would be ideal. So first up, I think task 1 is come up with the constants, which is going to be things like the lengths of these. So there's 20 data points, so that would definitely be a constant. That's 20 that direction. And possibly constants for the well, let's just come up with the 20 for now, and then you can come up with a few other ideas as to what you're going to go. So I think to start with, just get coding the names of these two into separate arrays, and then separate arrays for all the things I had highlighted.